we're always thinking, how can we get more out of the sales team?
Right.
We need to be thinking about not just how can I get them to work longer, but how can I actually teach them to be better?
Yeah.
Because there's only a certain number of hours that any of us can put into a day.
Correct.
I always joke around and say, I have found my limit is about 21 hours a day.
Wow.
Right?
Okay. That's the whole day, Bill.
Anything over 21 hours, my productivity just drops way off.
I would hope so.
Now I'm exaggerating for effect.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, 10, 12, some people might even work 14, but there is a limit.
Yeah. Yeah. And there should be.
And there should be a limit, for goodness
sake,
you gotta rest.
Right?
You have to rest. And I'd like to think that we're also enjoying our life along the way.
Yeah.
Because for some of us who've been doing this a long time, 10 years can go by.
Yeah.
And we never took a breath.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to get into work-life balance necessarily here. But I do want to talk about, for that time that you're allotting or investing each day, is what are we doing with that time?
Well, welcome to Sales Leadership Insights with Bill Stinnett. I'm his host, Rachel Lamagna. And today, Bill, you wanted to talk about aligning your activities with your highest level priorities. Let's talk about that. I know that our listeners are wanting to hear what you have to say.
Well, this is a topic that I hear so frequently when I interview sales leaders, especially if we're preparing to do a workshop for their teams.
Right.
I'll often ask, if we were to invest some time in some training and development for your team, what would be some of the things that you'd want them to either think differently or do differently after the workshop that they're not thinking or doing before we had the workshop? And so I always hear a variety of things. I want them to be more focused on filling the funnel, more focused on closing business instead of just hoping it'll close itself.
Right.
But very high on that list consistently is, I want my people to be more productive, more focused, more intentional about what they do. And even the word time management.
Right.
Better aligning what they're doing with what we know we need them to do.
Right.
On a day in and day out basis.
Right.
Yep.
And what makes this such a hard thing to do?
Yeah.
Why is it hard? Like, what you think it would be simple, but why is it hard for them,
This is so good. Well, it's hard for all of us, I think, in today's world to stay focused and not distracted.
Right.
I mean, for one, our phone's going off every 10 seconds.
Ding.
Exactly. In fact, I always tell people, shut off that little bell on your computer so you don't get dinged every 10 seconds. But so we're getting something via email, a text message, somebody's hitting our telephone, or somebody walking into the office.
Right.
And so there's so many, these other people want our attention or demand our attention. Being able to focus on what we know we need to do is probably the biggest challenge, I think, in dealing with how do you manage those distractions. Yeah, and they can be so easy to be distracted. Like you said, someone walks in, someone sends you a quick email, immediately you're off topic. How do we get back on? What does that look like? So, people talk a lot about multitasking. It's my belief that we're actually incapable of doing two things at once. I believe that too. So a computer can, right? And multi-threaded functions, right? They can do lots of things at one time. But I believe that the human brain can only do one thing at a time. So what we're talking about when we think we're multitasking, no, it's what we're doing is we're doing this for 11 seconds, and then we're doing that for 9 seconds, and we're doing this for 26 seconds, and we're doing that for a minute and a half. And what happens when we're switching constantly is that our productivity drops way off and stress goes way up. Right. Yeah. So it puts us in a position where we're less effective doing any one of those things. Yeah. Because we think we're trying to do them all at once. We think that we're doing them all together, but really we're multiple tasks, not multitasking. Yeah, for sure. Now, sales leaders, I think, will recognize that this is not just exclusively problematic for maybe their frontline sellers. Right. Yeah. If I'm leading a team, I might recognize that my sales managers also are scattered and maybe off task frequently, or just don't have their priorities in the right place. Or I, as a sales leader, director, vice president, whatever I may be, that I also feel pulled in 1,000 different directions, and the whole week can go by. Yeah. And some of the things that I really wanted to get to, I didn't get to. Yeah. So this will be a topic that I think will be important for everybody at any level. Any level. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, how do we keep, you were mentioning like the people that coming in and the things, how do we keep them from stealing that time?
Yeah. Very good. We're going to walk through a process of doing this that will get to kind of some of the tactical, what do you do now about protecting
the boundaries.
Boundaries. That's a good word for it. Yeah. And this might take more than one episode. I'm starting to feel already because there's a lot to this. When we do this in workshops, I typically spend 2 or 3 hours teaching this concept, but not just teaching it. We're very into what we call guided doing.
Yes.
So we would talk about a concept, then we would apply it.
Right.
And talk about a concept and apply it right in your calendar right now.
Right now. Do it, because just hearing it is one thing, but actually doing it is another.
Yeah. I always tell people I want our workshops to feel like, I don't want it to feel like we're having a swimming class in a classroom where we're just going to talk about swimming.
Right. Let's get in the pool.
Get in the water. That's exactly right. It's the only way we're ever going to start to apply some of this stuff. So I want to just talk for a couple of minutes about aligning activities with priorities. And then I've got a few tools that I'm going to make available to anybody that wants to download them. I've got a link right below in the description here, underneath wherever you're watching this video.
Yep.
And that link will take you to a place where you can download some of these tools completely free.
Okay.
Not charging for these or expecting anything except to help people to better manage their time.
Yeah.
And if they feel like I can help more, they'll look me up and call me.
Absolutely. And who doesn't love a free tool? That's the best way to do it.
I hope so. So first of all, let's just talk about our priorities tend to be what other people want us to do in a day. And so it's really common to just fall into more of a reactive mode where our priorities is whatever my boss is busting my chops about.
Right.
Or whatever the marketing person is asking me for today, or a customer service issue, or a billing issue, or, we've got an outage with our best client. We got to get on this thing right now. Right. And while some of those things are incredibly urgent, what ends up happening is the urgent starts to displace the important.
Yeah.
And we can go a whole day or a whole week or even longer without even getting around to the important pieces.
Yeah.
So recognizing, first of all, what are those high-level priorities.
That's right. Yep.
Would at least give us a fighting chance to weave those into our work week. And we're going to actually start by placing those in our work week.
Let's identify them.
Identify what they are first and understand that there are going to be some things that might displace that temporarily in any given hour, but that we need to spend time on those highest level priorities ideally every day or at least every week.
Yeah.
And so I like to use the example, I have kids.
Yep.
And so I know you do too.
Yep.
And so one of the things that certainly my kids are one of the highest priorities in my whole life, right?
Amen. Yep.
But that doesn't mean I get to spend all day hanging out with my kids.
Yeah.
But the point is that there are other things that are going to displace that temporarily, like a little thing called a job, right? Or maybe my own physical health, because I can't be a very good dad if I'm miserable or unhealthy to them. And so there's going to be some other things that take priority temporarily, but at a highest level, if I never get around to spending time with my kids, then I made a huge mistake.
Big. Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about with this is what are those highest level priorities that we can't afford to neglect?
Correct.
If we do that, we know we're going to, at some point in the future, we're going to see the negative effect of it.
Right.
And so here's what we want to do.
Yep.
Like I said, they can download this free tool here that I'm going to walk through. It's called Priorities and Activities Worksheet.
Okay.
And so anybody that wants to can go download that right now.
Sounds amazing.
And look at it while I'm talking this thing through.
Yeah.
But you're going to get the point just as I speak this through, whether or not you're looking at this. If somebody's driving down the road in their car, you're going to get the point.
Yes.
And you can do it later. But so this is a super simple little worksheet that I put together. At the top of the page, I'm just simply asking people to identify what are their highest level professional priorities.
Right.
And so it's just a little brainstorming session.
Yeah.
It'd be really good to turn your phone off.
Yeah.
Maybe not necessarily try to do this while you're driving down the road.
Nope.
But a little bit of quiet time and think about, okay, in my role, whether I'm managing a sales team, whether I'm a frontline seller, whether I'm the VP of sales, CRO, whatever I am, what are the highest level professional priorities for me right now?
Yeah.
Now, I might have my own opinion to tell people what I think the priorities should be.
Right.
But right now, we want to kind of test, what do you think?
What are they?
Yeah, what do you think your highest priorities would be through this exercise? Yeah. And then we're going to kind of question ourselves, is this really right?
Yeah.
So I have space for 10, but there might be 27 here. Although, think about this. Can you have 27 priorities?
I was just going to say, if you get more than 10 highest priorities, I don't think you have a life. That's it. You're just, your highest priorities are too many.
Yeah, my 23rd number one priority is. So I'm just asking for 10 here of the highest level. So let's just take a role here and say a sales manager, for example. Well, a sales manager is going to be responsible for forecasting.
Yes.
They're going to be responsible probably for going out and seeing clients or riding along with their salespeople. Right. They're going to have some responsibility around perhaps some data entry of some kind. Yeah. Reporting to management, what's kind of going on. But somewhere in there, what some managers will end up doing is neglecting perhaps, I think, the most important thing they should be doing on a daily basis, which is spending time with the people they oversee, helping them get better.
Yeah.
Because
coaching them.
Coaching is exactly right.
Yeah.
So we're always thinking, how can we get more out of the sales team?
Right.
We need to be thinking about not just how can I get them to work longer, but how can I actually teach them to be better?
Yeah.
Because there's only a certain number of hours that any of us can put into a day.
Correct.
I always joke around and say, I have found my limit is about 21 hours a day.
Wow.
Right?
Okay, that's the whole day, Bill.
Anything over 21 hours, my productivity just drops way off.
I would hope so.
Now I'm exaggerating for effect. Yeah. But whatever it is, 10, 12, some people might even work 14, but there is a limit.
Yeah, yeah. And there should be.
And there should be a limit, for goodness sake,
you gotta rest.
Right? You have to rest. And I'd like to think that we're also enjoying our life along the way.
Yeah.
Because for some of us who've been doing this a long time, 10 years can go by.
Yeah.
And we never took a breath.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to get into work-life balance necessarily here. But I do want to talk about, for that time that you're allotting or investing each day, is what are we doing with that time?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to just introduce this idea of spending and investing real quick, because this is important.
Let's
right
do
here.
It.
Years ago, I remember reading some books on good financial management.
Okay.
This was something I really wanted to learn in my life. So eventually I would eventually have a savings account.
Yeah.
Right. Which much of my life I never even had one.
Financially stable. Yeah.
And so one of the things I learned was the idea of investing first and spending the rest. So you get your income. Some of us are going to perhaps give that to some good, worthy causes, our local church, charity, whatever that is. But then in whatever we don't give away, we should probably take the first 10% or so and put that into some sort of a long-term savings.
Yes.
And then spend the rest as we see fit.
Right.
So this is what I was taught, is you save first and you spend the rest. You invest first, spend the rest.
Yeah.
A lot of times as we look at our time, we do just the opposite. We say, for one of my top priorities might, let's say be personal development.
Yeah.
So I want to get better at my job, or I want to do more coaching of my frontline sellers.
Right.
Sometimes we're so busy doing all the other activities in a day, we hope there will be some time left over to do some coaching.
Right.
But I found in my life, and I bet you and your husband have found too, if you spend all month to see if there's anything left over to invest.
Nothing.
There's never anything left over.
It's gone.
So you invest first and spend the rest. Yeah. That's why priorities matter.
Yeah.
Because if we have an idea of what matters most, we're more likely to weave that into our week and make that the first thing that we think about doing, as opposed to the last thing.
Well, and I love that with this list, you're able to put them down on paper. You know, a lot of times it's somewhat, that old school mentality of write it down.
Yeah.
But now I'm seeing and hearing from you that we're writing it down, and then we're saying, okay, not only writing it down, putting it in a list, but this is going to be the first thing that we do versus the last thing.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
So
so I think that actually doing this little exercise should be a pretty high priority, shouldn't it?
Huge priority.
So people will sometimes hear this and they think, okay, well, in a week or two when I have time, I'll look at my priorities.
Right.
Well, this should be something we probably look at today.
Immediately.
How many more days do we want to continue being out of balance?
Right.
Or ignoring or neglecting the most important things? And so Make some time to do this right
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
But this should be at a time when we can really brainstorm it and think it through. And the way I developed this is don't worry about which one's most and second and third most important
Yes.
at this moment.
Right.
Just make a list of like the 10 things you think might matter most.
Yes.
But then next to that, as you can see on the little worksheet, it's a good idea to literally rank them.
Yeah.
It's different than rate them. So we
Yes.
might rate them all. This is a 10.
Yeah.
This is a 9. This is
Yes.
a 10. This is a 9. Not rate,
Yeah.
rank.
Rank.
So which one matters most? Which one's second? Which one's third, fourth, fifth? And you're going to figure out what order they go
Yeah.
in here. But the importance of this then is to see which one should win out
Right.
in any given time.
Right.
And if I find myself out of balance and completely pulled off task for some number of hours, when I want to get back on task,
Yeah.
I want to look at number 1
Yes.
and say, does that need some of my attention right now?
Yeah.
And if I've somehow addressed that this week, then I go to number 2,
Yeah.
3, 4, et cetera.
Now, what happens, Bill?
Yeah.
If you've got 2 number 1s or 2 number 2,
Yeah.
how do we balance that? Which one is the most important?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really encourage people in this exercise, force yourself to rank them.
Yes.
And I have some people that say, well, I want 1A and 1B.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're basically saying 1A is first and 1B is second.
Yes. Yeah.
So 1 through 10 would be fine.
Yeah. Just be really honest is what you're saying. Yeah.
Exactly. And brutally blunt with yourself
Yeah.
about what you know you should be doing. Now,
Yeah.
as I said, someone else might have their own opinions.
Yeah.
I might come along
Yeah.
and say, are you sure that 4 is 4? Maybe
Yeah.
number 7 should be number 3.
Yeah.
And those kind of things. But just for now, what do you think matters most? Now, then what we're going to do is compare our highest level priorities, which
Okay.
we've identified individually.
Right.
I've said this is a high priority. We're going to compare that to what we're actually doing.
Okay. How are we doing that?
Yeah. So in the bottom of this worksheet here is 20 spaces
Okay.
to list the types of activities that I might be working on in any given week.
Okay.
So we can group these together. So
Yeah.
for example, one group of activities might be internal reporting.
Okay.
I've got spreadsheets to fill out. I've got presentations to give to people internally that need information from me.
Right.
So there's going to be that. There'll probably even be some preparation around that reporting. Put together the slides that you're going to present to the board.
Exactly. Make sure it's correct.
That kind of thing. Maybe even practice it, run it through
Yeah.
with some other people. So there might be that. There would be, as I said, forecasting.
Yeah.
At every level in a sales organization, forecasting is crucial.
Absolutely.
So how much time are we spending on that each week and some number of hours? Another category would be coaching,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Which
taking your
is,
time.
I dare say, maybe one of the most underrated
Yeah.
things in most sales organizations I see today.
Yeah.
We all know how important coaching is, or we like to believe we know,
Right.
but then we don't do enough of it.
Right.
What that tells me is it's actually not a priority. Because I could say, for example, that my physical fitness is a high priority.
Right.
But if I eat garbage and I never do anything
Don't
in
go
the
anywhere.
form of working out, then it's not really a priority. I
It's
just
not.
said that it was a
Yeah.
priority.
Yeah.
It's not actually a priority.
Because it sounds good.
It sounds good.
But are we doing it?
That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah.
So these kinds of things, now talk about being brutally honest.
Yeah.
Here's where you have to really be willing to confess to
Okay.
yourself or
Yeah.
to a small group of people, however you want to do this
Yeah.
exercise, groupings of activities. Time that I would spend, let's say, on conference calls internally. Travel time.
Yeah.
Maybe to
Yeah.
and from work, or maybe to go see clients. How many hours am I spending a week in the car or on
Right.
airplanes
Right.
or what have you? So the idea is to make a list of all the different types of activities that you might be doing in a week.
Okay.
And then we're going to ask 2 questions against that.
Okay. What are they?
Next to each one, we want to identify and take a guess
Yeah.
at how many hours might we be doing that on a weekly basis.
Okay.
So if we're looking at,
Yeah.
let's say, travel time, going to see clients, or even driving around to go ride-alongs with our salespeople,
Right.
or flying or what have you, what are we doing? Are we
Yeah.
spending 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, 15 hours a week in that
Yeah.
when it comes to forecasting? Whether this is forecast reviews with our team or plugging numbers into a database
Right.
or reporting to my executive
Right.
who wants to hear what are we forecasting, what's
Yeah.
going to close. How many hours a week are we spending there?
Yeah.
How many hours a week are we actually spending coaching our sales team?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I want to emphasize, go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like these numbers are going to be surprising.
Yeah. And they'll add up quick.
Yeah.
So I had one gentleman, a senior executive, work through this with me, and he was estimating how many hours a week he was doing on each of these. Came up with 14 different things.
Okay.
And he added them up, and it was 136 hours.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Now,
so he's really, it's a
there's
little
only 168 hours in the entire week anyway. So I think he was probably exaggerating exactly how much time, but that's what ends up happening.
Right.
And we need to look at this, recognize it, be aware of it, because I'll come back to coaching for a second. We'd like to think we're doing coaching with our salespeople, but I want to specify.
Yeah.
It's not how many hours are you talking to a salesperson.
Yeah, so good.
It's how many hours are you helping them get better.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah.
So coaching is not necessarily, when are you going to bring in the XYZ order?
Right.
I mean, that's an important question to ask.
Right.
But if that's the only question I ask, and I'm not talking to them about how to bring in the XYZ order,
right,
or who else we need to get involved from our side to help bring in the XYZ order, I'm not actually coaching.
Right.
I'm just managing, or I'm just requiring data or information feedback from them.
Task.
So coaching needs to be the number of minutes or hours I'm actually helping people get better at the craft.
So good.
And here's what I think is true, is that for a lot of sales managers and executives, and I struggle with this in my business too, coincidentally, is that we don't make the time to help our people get better to the degree that we should. Because as I said, if we want more out of people, we can only expect more out if we help them get better.
That's right.
So how much time are we investing in helping them get better? Now, any sales leader might say, well, maybe I'm not the next best person to help them to get better at the knowledge of our product set or time management, right? I'm not a time management expert. Why do you expect me?
Right.
Fine. But we should at least be deciphering and detecting that people need help in these areas, and then pointing to the resources that we can get.
Right.
And in essence, that's what I do for a living.
Yes.
Right? An executive will say, my team is lost in terms of forecasting. Our forecasts are so inaccurate, we're out of control. I need to go hire somebody.
Yeah. Call Bill.
And that's what I do for a living. I like to tell sales executives that I'm just an extension of what you already are doing.
Right.
You know you need to be helping people get better, and I come along and I come alongside you and help you to do that. So anyone that's working through this exercise, exactly, helps them become better coaches too. You're right. Yeah. And sometimes we even do coach the coach.
Yeah.
Where we help them become better coaches.
Because sometimes they know how to get the tasks done. They know how to ask and manage the situation, manage the sales report. Yeah. But coaching is something that's very different and can be hard for people to learn. Yeah. But you would help them find that groove for it, per se. Yeah.
I have to say that in recent years, the past 2 or 3 years, I find just as much call for sales manager training as for salesperson training. Yeah. And the reason for that is my belief, everything begins and ends in professional sales with the frontline sales manager. Yeah. It's what they're asking their salespeople to execute on a daily basis, and what they're talking about, right, and what they're helping people to get better at doing that drives the whole thing.
It does.
So if we have management that has kind of relegated to just simply asking when the order's coming in, we're missing that layer. That's the most important layer. We're really missing the whole effect that the management position, that frontline manager position, needs to be fulfilling. Right. So,
and just a side note, something that I'm thinking about is, once a year you have a review, and it can't be at that time that the manager is saying, "Hey, I noticed the X, Y, and Z, and you really need to work on that." It should be throughout the year that the manager is saying, these are the things let's focus on. And so when it comes to the review, it's a review of improvement, not a review of this is what you need to do.
That's right.
And so I think that this would help them get there.
They need to have some goals. They need to have a yardstick to measure, are we making progress toward the goal? Yeah. I had one vice president of sales admit something that was, pretty forthcoming for him to say. But he said, "Yeah, Bill, I like what you're saying. At the first of the year, I had all my salespeople, 100 and something salespeople. I had them all put together a territory plan, what they were going to do for the year. I had them put together their goals. And I had them put together a kind of a plan of action that they were going to execute on a regular basis. And I had all my 114 people send that report in to me. Okay. And I never looked at them.
I was just going to say that. I was waiting for the punchline and I said, did he read it? Like that was the first question in my mind.
I never looked at him.
Did he even read it? I mean, that's such a lot of time for them to work on something.
Yes.
And you know that they're putting their heart and soul into
Yes.
it because they know that the boss is going to be looking at it.
Yep.
And what was the purpose of it?
I'm going to interject right now, and this is a little off topic, but I have to interject. When you take the onus of trying to learn, and now I'm going to try to understand 114 territory plans and plans of action, that's too much for you to take.
It is. Yeah.
Because of what we just said here.
Yeah.
We don't have enough hours in the day to even
There's
respond
not 114
to what...
high priorities.
Exactly. 114 high priorities. I would suggest that when people put together their plans, is you have each salesperson go to their frontline manager and present their territory plan, present their plan of action.
Amazing.
And then ask the frontline seller to help them to remain accountable to it on a regular basis.
So good.
So here's one thing I like to joke around about. You know, a lot of people set a New Year's resolution. And have you heard of quitting day? Do you know what that is?
No. What's that?
I just learned about it.
Oh, wait. Okay. You'd say it because I only have like a little understanding of it. Yeah.
I just learned about this year. So this is a real thing. Quitting day.
Quitting day.
It's the second Friday of January.
Okay.
And according to somebody who made this up and tracks such things, there's an app on your phone that I forget, Strava, I think it's called. You familiar with it?
I'm not familiar with it.
This is an exercise app or an app for people who are athletic. They're cycling, they're running, they're rowing, whatever they're doing, and they track their activities.
Love that for them.
So they did a study in 2019, and they've done it every year since then, and they say that 80% of the people give up on their New Year's resolution by the second Friday in January.
Quitting day.
Oh
my goodness.
So I wrote a post on LinkedIn in January, and I said, hey, it's the 18th. If you haven't quit on your New Year's resolution, you're ahead of 80% of the people out there who already did quit.
Funny. Oh my goodness.
But here's
Here's
the big bomb on that, okay?
Yeah.
Here comes the big takeaway from this. There's nothing wrong with a New Year's resolution except for we only do it once a year.
Yeah.
What we need is a new week resolution.
So good.
So we take this year-long plan and we say, what are we going to get done by next Thursday?
Right.
And now each salesperson is going to get together with their frontline manager and review the progress of the plan.
Amazing.
By next Thursday. And then each of those managers is going to go get with their director, and they're going to be responsible for presenting back, and the directors will present back to the vice presidents. Back to the topic.
Okay.
Once we've got this list of activities, how many hours a week are we spending or investing? And that's what the right-hand column in this little worksheet is about. Back to the idea of spend versus invest. Spend suggests that I'm getting rid of money, and it's for a temporary gain of some kind. I'm going to go spend this on dinner. I'm going to spend it on clothes. I'm going to spend it on entertainment, whatever. I know your family travels extensively.
Love to travel.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you're willing to spend money on travel.
Yeah.
That's different, though, than investing, where we put our capital in, and we expect to have that available to us at some point in the future, plus maybe even a return.
Please.
Right. So as you look at these activities, think about which ones of these represent expenditures versus which ones represent investments.
Yeah.
So an expenditure might be, let's say, some of this internal conference calls that we have to be on.
Right. Right.
And the investment would be spending time with our 5 best customers.
Yes.
Or spending time with some of our salespeople or riding along or whatever it is that we're coaching.
Yeah.
If I'm a vice president, coaching my directors on how to be better directors.
Yeah.
So on the right-hand side, then, we're just simply deciding, would I like to invest more of this, more time in this, or spend less time in this? Based on the number of hours you estimate,
right?
Do you want to spend less or invest more? And that itself is a very important little part of the exercise, because then next week, when you're putting together your week, here's the recommendation. I'm going to wrap up with this because I don't have enough time to just talk about all the... We're going to have to do a second episode on
Totally need a second one. I'm already feeling it.
Okay, good. Me too. But as you're putting your week together, here's just a couple of tips on that. Put your week together the week prior.
Yes.
So if I come in on Monday, I'm usually already so buried with emails, telephone calls, and tasks that I don't get around to thinking about what the week needs to be until maybe Tuesday at 2:00.
Yeah. You're already into
and Tuesday
the week.
at 2:00, the whole rest of my week is already eaten up. It's burned up with what everybody else has got into my calendar.
Yeah.
So the way to do this is to look at my professional priorities, compare that with activities.
Yes.
And ask yourself, what's not working here?
Yeah.
And in fact, I do have people tell me sometimes they have to take something from the top and add it to the bottom.
Really? Okay.
Because it appears in the top 10.
Yeah.
But I'm not spending any time on it.
But you're not doing it.
So I need to put that in the bottom and decide, do I want to, obviously I'm going to want to do more of that. And maybe estimate or decide, I need to spend at least a couple of hours a week out in front of customers. If I'm an executive, I got to get out in front of customers and meet with their executives and help drive business forward, at least maybe for the largest opportunities in our pipeline.
Yeah.
And maybe that's an area where I need to invest some more time.
So good.
It might be as a frontline manager. Yes, I talk to my reps frequently because we're trying to close deals and when's this deal coming in. But as we said a few minutes ago, I don't remember the last time I actually helped them to get better at their job.
Yeah.
So my suggestion would be for all frontline managers, spend at least a half an hour every week with each person that reports to you.
Yeah.
Now that's going to sound big.
Right.
Because, hey, I got 6 to reports, Bill. That's 3 hours in a week I have to do that.
Right.
But let's think about that. Helping people get better.
Yeah.
Is there a higher priority than that?
Right.
I mean, sure, maybe reporting to my vice president the numbers we're shooting for this month. I understand some of those things are high priority. But if I don't have time to work with my direct reports, helping them get better at their job, something's out of whack.
Right. That's your purpose of being there in a sense of managing and helping them be the best that they can be in sales.
If you believe that part of your role is helping people get better, which is the reason I ask people to go through the first part of this exercise, because if we don't believe that's a priority, then obviously we're not going to make time for it.
Yeah.
I'll just say again, even at the highest levels in an organization, vice presidents, spend time with your directors. Directors, spend time with your managers, because helping the people on my team to get better is the only way I'm going to get more production from my organization.
Yeah.
It's
Agreed.
absolutely crucial. So we look at something like this, and then we want to set up our week. The week prior, take the following week and block out some times when you're going to spend intentional time on some of these highest priorities.
Yeah.
Now we know that there might be urgencies that come along that knock us off task.
Always are. Yeah.
But if I don't have a plan, then I guarantee you they're going to knock you off task, right?
Yeah.
Stephen Covey is famous for a little story that he told in one of his books. And I read this very carefully because I wanted to know, did he make this up or was this? So here's what he says in one of his books following 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Okay.
One of the 7 habits is put first things first. Well, then he wrote a subsequent book called First Things First.
Okay.
And here's a story that he tells, and I'll wrap up with this. It's just such a great story. He says, a colleague of ours saw a professor give a lecture once.
Okay.
I have no idea who the colleague is or who the professor is, but Covey said a colleague saw a professor, and here's what the professor did. He came walking into his classroom with a big glass jug filled up with all different size rocks and sand.
Okay.
And in front of the whole class, he dumped all this out on a table and then separated. Big rocks, medium-sized rocks, small rocks, and then a big pile of sand.
Okay.
And here was his illustration. The big rocks are the highest priorities in my life.
Yes.
Then the medium are things that are pretty important, and the small ones are kind of important, and the sand represents all the busy work in our lives.
The filler stuff.
It's not all that important.
Okay. Yeah.
So here's the illustration. He takes the sand and puts that in the jug first, then tries to fit the bigger rocks in, and they all don't fit. They can't fit all in the jar. So he dumps it back out, separates it again, and he says, now here's what we need to do. You put the big rocks in first.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people listening to this are going to say, I've heard that before. Yep, I heard that analogy before. Okay, the question is not if we heard it. The question is, are we doing it?
Yes.
So these highest level priorities, these big rocks first, then medium, then the small rocks. Then you take the sand and you pour it in, and the sand goes all in and around those big rocks.
Goes
but
in the
knowing
grooves.
what the big rocks are, which is the purpose of this first part of this exercise,
Yes.
and then secondly, putting the big rocks into our calendar first, then all those telephone calls and the distractions is the sand that falls all in around the big rocks.
Yes.
Sometimes a big rock will get displaced, but we need to fight like crazy to not let them get displaced.
Don't let them.
Yeah.
Wow. Awesome. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, this is a great topic. I'm
It was
so
a great
excited.
time. I learned a lot, and I can't wait to download that sheet myself.
Well, I appreciate you so much, and we hope that everybody will take the opportunity to download this and work through this because it's a very worthwhile endeavor.
It sure is. Well, thanks again, Bill.
You bet.